So one of the things, I think one of Marcos's motivations in me talking today was to talk about what we can learn from some other markets. So I've spent, as a bit of background, thank you for the introduction, I've spent most of my life on the agency side, have spent the last 10 years managing global business. So I've spent a lot of time in Moscow, if anybody's had the pleasure, a fun place to do business, a lot of time in Brazil, and actually lived before joining Mastercard, spent the last 18 months in China. So I kind of know a little bit about the what we call the BRIC markets, and they're certainly fast growth markets. So what I wanted to do is kind of talk about what we can learn from those markets. Explain a little bit of the boring like facts and figures of how fast they're growing, why do we care about them, and how we can kind of, how we can apply that knowledge to what we're doing today. So let's try to run technology. Voila. Okay, so today we said we're talk about the BRIC markets. It might be pretty basic. You might know some of the stuff, so I always talk fast anyway. Apologies. I'll try to slow down. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the BRIC countries. We're talking about in the traditional marketing sense. And we talk, people have talked today about different investment strategies and whether I'm going to put my money behind my current growth, which is my big volume, or whether I'm going to put my money behind my future growth. So so if you look at this, model, you'd sit there and say there's 7 different rows of countries, and you'd look at the top and you'd say Europe and the U.S. They're the ones that have not the largest population, but if you look at the gross domestic product, they're huge countries in terms of that's where most of the money is, and that's where most of the money is per capita. And if you look at it's not just population, it's income. More and more now, if you look over at the consumption chart, I mean, they're making more and more money. You think of the population of some of these countries being, lower economic scale. These guys are becoming more and more middle income, middle to high income. You read if you get Ad Age, if you get any of these marketing marketing periodicals, they all talk about the growth of luxury goods in markets like China and Brazil. But in terms of advertising, the same story. If you look at the traditional sense and you look at the the left 2 columns, the big developed markets, there's $141 billion a year in advertising in the United States, when there's only a much smaller level of that in Russia, and $47,000 the per capita advertising expense per person is $47,000 in the United States, which is kind of scary to think about. That everyone's got every man, woman, and child's got $47,000 of advertising placed against it. And you compare it to a market like India, which has got 1/10 of that. But if you look at the growth rates, and that's where you get into, I've spent 18 months in China where the marketplace, the ad spending, people can't spend enough money there. I mean, they're getting 17, 18% a year. It is the center of the universe for multinational clients because everybody's looking at all the numbers I just showed you before, all the people, all the disposable income, and they're spending more and more money. So, I mean, it's a good time to be a media owner if you're looking for expansion plans. It might be too late. It might not be too late. If you're looking for, expansion plans, certainly it's a great time to be a media owner in India and China because the growth rates they keep cranking those growth rates, and there's no sign of slowing up. You think about it. It's like how many people sit there. I'm sure there's people. I know it's hard to believe, but I'm sure there's people who are on their BlackBerries right now. Marcos. So we're all multitasking today, right? No one's sitting there paying attention. So if you think that somebody's sitting there waiting for you to turn the page to see your magazine ad, ain't happening. So you got to find ways to integrate and extend into all different forms, not just different forms of media, into word of mouth, into retail, into all those different aspects. And that's happening, and it's a lot easier to happen where there's a lot less rules in place. And I think that in some of the developing markets, where there's a lot less hierarchy, a lot less structure, there's a lot more room to go out and do some cool things. So you make the same story. It's like if you look at populations, the general market is growing 1-2% a year, and the Hispanic population is growing at a much faster rate than that. How do we leverage and take advantage of that? Here's the number in terms of 2010 estimate is 50 million people. 2050 the estimate is half that. Double that. So if you look at that compared to the United States, you see the red line. That's the Hispanic compounded growth rate. You look at the blue line, that's the rest of the country. So by the year 2050, Hispanics are going to represent a quarter of the population. It's now going to be 25% of the population, and it's going to have income rates that are growing faster than anybody else. It's going to turn into a bigger and bigger is a list of, I mean, the largest Hispanic advertisers, and you know, bless the P&Gs of the world. They spend, you know, $200 million according to Ad Age. That's fantastic. And this is the top 10 advertisers and the amount of their general market money that they spend. Language is obviously a big issue, and what I would suggest is you guys have to prove in a really empirical way. You can talk all, and I heard the conversation today. More passion it's the most, you know, the best common denominator, culture. You sit there and you agree with all that. You really have to prove it in real, tangible business sense. I mean, you sit there and it's fundamentally, you sit there and talk about, you know, more passion, more engagement for people who, you know, consume media in Spanish versus English. It's an emotional argument unless you're showing facts of, here's what I did, here's my business results. I mean, again, you know, when the CFO is sitting there riding shotgun, it's real, tangible business results. So, you know, these are like my, you know, 6 suggestions of, you know, getting into, if you buy the algorithm of, obviously we showed, you know, the population's getting bigger and bigger, more and more income, so there's a huge opportunity. So, I mean, the good news, I do think there's a huge, colossal opportunity for growth. You know, no one wants, you know, everybody's happy with 1 or 2% growth, but I mean, there's definitely the opportunity for, you know, step change. 6 suggestions. That's where we are now. We'd love to keep, you know, growing and building. That's one example. We've just, you know, introduced, if you live in this market, we just introduced a campaign against the general market called Prices New York. I'm not going to give you an ad about our campaign, but it's a very, very integrated, you know, and I won't bore you with the details, but it's a very, very integrated, everything from how we leverage media, how we leverage merchants, because they're important to our business as well, the Macy's of the world, how do we, you know, how do we give them more value than the typical traditional business relationship. So we're trying, and you got to keep, you know, we continue to try, you know, we're on the journey. I challenge any marketer who says, I've got it figured out and I've optimized it perfectly, isn't probably, you know, doesn't feel that way. There's always room for growth. But that's an example of how to do it. Thanks, everybody.